work session, and I'm going to open the work session, then I'm going to go out of the work session into the informal session while we hear an update from TV and F&R, and then we will go out of informal back to the work session. Since we have them here to share with us, and I would ask you to introduce yourselves and then go on with your presentation. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the Commission. My name is Mike Dyke. I'm the Fire Chief at 12 Live Fire and Rescue. With me I have Cassandra Olvin, who's our Public Affairs Chief, who you've met both of us before, but thanks for allowing us to have a little bit of time on your agenda just to update you as a proud service provider in Yamhill County. Just give you a little update. And I know I've been here before in front of you to kind of kick off where we were with the contract and other things occurring in the Newburgh city and the rural area surrounding. But the contract period has been going extremely well. Initially, that was a 2-year contract that started a year ago last July. And we were able to actually achieve a lot of the goals that we had, that we developed between the city and the rural district as far as where they were when they came to us. They were having some significant staffing issues, both with their career staffing and their volunteer staffing. We've been able to take their career staffing from 2-person units to 4-person, which is actually not only the national standard, but it's a standard that TVFNR applies. And that's on a 24/7 schedule, so that's the minimum staffing they'll be at is the 4 people on each unit. On the heavier assets, and then the ambulance obviously has 2 paramedics on board. We also augmented some of the supervisory staffing, so we have a chief officer that is also staffed at 24 hours a day, and they're staffed at one of the Newburgh sites, and provide command oversight over not only that geography, but more of the 12 Valley system. And then because of the navigable waterways and the recreation that occurs on the Willamette River and surrounding areas, we augmented the water rescue capability, which is, again, not just for Newburgh and TVFNR, but we'll respond across the region and help with water rescue incidents. Those are very complex, dangerous, not just for the citizens that may be in trouble, but the responders. So we were able to augment that too. The additional staffing means they're able to handle those incidents quickly and potentially mitigate them when they're small, which is good for everybody. It creates better outcomes. We have paramedics that are dispatched on all emergency calls, so we're offering the highest level of emergency medical treatment that the industry has to offer. We've upgraded their apparatus. Newburgh was dealing with some apparatus issues as far as the workability of some of those, and we replaced some of those with some of the apparatus we had in our fleet. We augmented their training, and it's really just been a good contract period. And also, we recently found out all fire departments in the country, and there's actually 40,000 fire departments in the country, they're all rated by the Insurance Services Office, and that's the factor that insurance companies use to determine what your premiums are on your homeowner's insurance and other things. And previously, the Newburgh area, I think the city was a 4, and the rural area was a 9, and that's on a scale of 1 to 10. 1 is the best, and there aren't any 1s in Oregon. The best is a 2, and 10 is essentially you don't have a fire department. And across all of Newburgh now there are 2. So that came with TVFNR and the staffing level. So the citizens should see a dramatic change both in the city and the rural area.
Excuse me, Chief, the ISO reading in the rural area is it June now?
Yeah. So anywhere within 5 miles of a fire station, which is most of the rural district, that achieves. Then once you get beyond 5 miles, it steps a little bit higher as far as the rating itself. But part of the planning process we've been working through with the rural district board and the TVFNR board is the future potential of adding a fire station site in some of those areas that goes beyond that 5-mile mark to help make sure that not only do those citizens receive a high level of service, but they can also enjoy that lower rating in what they would be paid. So that was a really good piece of news that we got recently. As far as the annexation, and I don't know if you want to cover some of this?
I was going to just cover kind of some of the community outreach during
Sure.
the contract and the annexation phase. We had committed to you, as well as the City Council of Newburgh and the Rural Board, that we would honor the tradition of Newburgh Fire Department, who had always prided themselves on really strong community connections and community programs. So we wanted to let you know we don't take that commitment lightly, and we have been able to follow through specific to both the contract and the election that was recently in November. We were able to conduct 3 town halls for the city and the rural for a total of 6 to educate folks about what the implications of both the contract and an election would have for them. We did 28 presentations and or community events where we were able to share information. We had 4 direct mailings to the city and the rural constituents, and that outlined again what the pros, cons, and implications would be of annexation. We did 2 informational videos, which I think most of you may have seen, and we circulated that on social media because we know with the rural there aren't as many places where people gather and get information traditionally, and we had 926 views of those videos. So we did feel like that was a pretty successful way. We boosted that in social media, which means you can really target by geolocation who gets that in their feed for a very low price. And then we had, over the course since July of 2016, 9 newspaper articles, 4 newspaper ads, and 9 newsletter articles. So we just wanted to let you know that we don't plan to stop conducting outreach in the communities, but we took that commitment seriously, and then to let you know how we were accountable to your expectations.
Great.
The November election happened, obviously, and there were 2 separate measures, actually 3. 2 in the city. One was, does the citizens of the city want to join TDFNR permanently? The second question was, would you like the charter amendment that would, actually it wasn't a charter amendment, but it was a piece that would reduce their rate as far as that rate that the citizens used to pay through their city taxes for the fire department would be reduced, and then have some process that they'd go through on how that could change in the future. 69% of the citizens said yes in that vote, and those 2. So that passed by a very large margin. And in the rural area, they obviously had a big ask in that their taxes were quite low, and they would, the ask was, do you want to join TDFNR and pay TDFNR's tax rate? And in that case, we were 63% to the yes. So again, very high considering the question that was before those citizens, and clearly they saw the value in what we were offering, and said yes in that. And there's 2 issues with them. One was to join us. The second was to dissolve the rural district, which is required in statute. So where we find ourselves today is Cassandra and her team has been working through all the issues, and it's not easy to dissolve the fire department, thankfully, and it's not easy to go through this annexation process, but a number of pieces that have to be completed. We went through the first hearing, and this issue, as we've shared with you before, has to go through Washington County, since 12 Valley Fire and Rescue is primarily in Washington County. The statute's required to go through their commission. The first hearing went fine, but between that and the hearing tonight, we found out there's a petition that is asking some questions around the election. And so that we'll walk through that piece tonight with that Board of Commissioners and find out what they want to do there. But we really have appreciated all of your support. This feels like a great thing, not just for the TDFNR before Newburgh, but for all of TDFNR and the Newburgh citizens and the Yamhill County residents. So we've appreciated that, and hopefully we can get through the last few pieces of this annexation process and just make it to where it's moves forward in the future.
I could add one thing to that, Chief. As part of the fairly long annexation process, which is very messy from a statutory standpoint, there's about 7 different laws that govern how annexations have to occur, and some point to other laws that aren't about annexations, and so just navigating that has been a little bit challenging at times, but we have been going through the steps in case the voters approved in November the measures in the rural and in the city, which includes Department of Revenue preliminary review. They have done a preliminary review and approval. So what they're waiting on now is that final packet from Washington County that says we bless these annexations and they can move forward. So what the process that the fire chief was talking about, there's a kind of an open public input process between the first and the second annexation hearing. And during that time, if 100 electors or more within TDFNR proper jurisdiction that existed before Newburgh and Newburgh Rural, they say they want to vote on the issue, they can potentially request that. We have some fundamental differences of opinion about what a valid petition is, and we'll be talking about that with the commission tonight. So best case scenario, they agree with us and they do the final order, they send that to Department of Revenue, and everything is done and in place for everything to take effect July 1 of 2018. The best scenario is that we have to do an election within our existing jurisdiction to ask our voters whether or not they want to let Newburgh and Newburgh Rural join the fire district permanently. So it's not ideal. We had actually, in a previous process with Washington County District 2, asked Washington County to clean up some of the processes because it is messy, and unfortunately since that time last year they haven't quite been cleaned up, so we'll just continue to move forward as best as we can, and we'll provide you an update as we are done.
What would the disadvantage be to the existing, so that the annexation goes forward? What would be the downside for Washington County?
We don't see any downside.
The downside is they pay less taxes.
Yeah.
So if they're really upset about that, then that could be, being facetious. But because they pay the same rate, that they have paid the same rate, and they will pay the same rate as far as the permanent tax rate we have in our local option levy, as long as that that continues to be approved. And then the third leg of that is the bonds, capital bonds. And I mentioned some of the upgrades. So they're subject to the bonds, but because bond payments are financially calculated based on your assessed valuation, with the addition of Newburgh and Newburgh Rural, the assessed valuation of the total district grows, which makes the bond payment less. So everyone pays less to pay those bonds off, and in fact, we just got refinanced recently, and just the refinancing alone saved over $1 million in our bond calculation. So we don't see a disadvantage, which actually makes this whole notion that we need to put it to a vote somewhat confusing to us. As well, what are we going to tell them? Do you want to? And all of you know, I mean, it's not cheap to put anything before the voters. It's an expensive process, and especially where public safety's kind of waiting in the wings here. Is that something that we want to hold up the process over? So it'll be an interesting conversation with the Washington County Board of Commissioners.
Has this petition, has it reached the 100 signatures? Okay. So
Yes, sir. And they did, the county verified that those are electors residing in TVFNR's area. But that's it. They haven't done anything else to vet the validity of that petition, and that's where we'll be talking with them tonight to let them know that we don't feel that it meets the statutory requirements for petitions. We don't know what these people were told who put their names on it, if they even understood the implication that has that taxpayer money will have to be spent on an election that will only stand to reduce taxes for those in the affected area.
If they signed a petition, what does the petition say?
The only version that we have been privy to is simply saying, do you want to vote about this? But it doesn't say what the implications are, what the territory is, what the cost of an election would be, what the impacts would be. So that's where we feel like it's really insufficient to require this kind of additional process this kind of additional investment of taxpayer money and the potential of disrupting a process that's been underway and that was voter approved by Newburgh and Yamhill County residents. So our hope is the commission will see that perspective tonight. They've
So
been
this is-
super helpful and supportive to us, so.
This is a county ordinance, not an ORS that we're dealing with.
It's an ORS in one area where it says 100 electors can petition for it, but then it has all these requirements in that statute and another statute that talks about what that petition needs to contain.
Address, yeah.
So,
Interesting.
Well, then, all we can do is wish you luck with that.
thank you.
And,
That you
we-
should know.
We hope you make a very strong presentation tonight to the commissioners so that they will see they will be clear to acknowledging what's already taken place and move forward with this annexation. I know that based on the outcome of the vote, the citizens of Newburgh and the rural area are quite excited about having better emergency access, and we as the commissioners are excited for that. Every area of our county is important to us, so we appreciate the fact that TBS has the ability to enhance those services. So we thank you for being here,
Thank you.
and
Merry Christmas.
You too.
Nice to see you. Thanks for the time. Yeah, thank you.
Chief,
Good luck tonight.
Commissioner Dyke, is that any relationship?
He is, and I've threatened him to call grandma if he doesn't.
Stop that recording.
I get confused. He's actually a distant relative, but we're all related. In fact, there's 100 or more in Washington County. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you guys, he's a short timer, so.
Yeah, you better hurry up and get some work
My
out.
threats don't mean
Yeah.
anything to him
Yeah.
anymore.
Good luck. Thank you all very much.
Thank
Thanks a
you.
lot. Take care.
Outside of executive session, and then when we start talking about the particular properties, then we would go into executive session and discuss those. So if you want to go ahead and have the policy discussion first, we
Well,
talked a
it
little
seems
bit
to me
about.
that would be the most, the best way to proceed,
Yeah.
because then
Yeah.
we need to know what policies we're gonna be working with in order to move forward with our decision making on the properties. So I would suggest we do that. Brian, is there,
Yeah, can someone knock on the door and there's a place for me to sit while that happens? And I'd like to hear the rest of the session after that is complete.
okay, we'll
We're
be
gonna
doing
do
the
the
policy
policy
first,
first.
then
Yeah.
we'll go into
But your policy is going to
executive
be about 5 minutes.
It is. Thank you.
Boy, Brian,
I was
you're wishful
afraid, I
thinking.
didn't know,
Wow.
Okay.
You don't know this group.
okay.
Now I'm intrigued. Now I'm going to. Now boot
Okay.
me out when you're ready to boot me out.
So, let's then proceed with the work session on discussing the policies around how we're gonna deal with these foreclosed properties. And for that then, I would ask that our county council, unless somebody has questions before that, Kristen, if you...
Yeah, so we talked a little bit about this last week, and it seemed appropriate that we have a more in-depth conversation about how the board would like to deal with these properties, both the ones that we currently have already acquired through the foreclosure process and how we want to deal with them going forward. We've had some discussions around some properties that might be appropriate to stay in county ownership, others that might be appropriate candidates for possible open space or affordable housing or other uses. And so really it's an opportunity to talk about how you would like to approach those properties. And if we wanted to have a working framework that we follow, or if we want to do something a little more formal and actually adopt a written policy. I've talked to a couple of the counties that don't have formal policies on this, but they do have sort of a set of guidelines and practices that they follow. If you want, I can sort of run through my thoughts on what a potential practice might look like, and then, at any point, if you want, we can chat about any part of that process.
Before we get started on the actual policy, I just wanted to ask the board if there was any interest. I had brought up my concerns about the fairness, the whole justice aspect of taking above and beyond what the tax is owed to us, taking the equity and the rest of it. And I think my whole perspective is that, you know, fairness and justice dictates that government takes what is owed and not the savings and the equity that is not owed, so that we can balance our budgets. So sort of a Fifth Amendment, philosophically, a Fifth Amendment application here. So I'm just wondering if there's any interest in whether or not by state statute we would have any wiggle room where we could in this county, you know, we do a lot of things differently here, and maybe we just do what's right and take what is owed to us and not kick somebody while they're down and take the rest of their savings and equity and use it to, you know, aggrandize local government.
Philosophically, I agree with Commissioner Steer. I guess technically, and that was the question that she asked, philosophically, I believe if we take a piece of property because of back taxes owed, and those taxes make up 5% of what the value of the property or whatever it is, that we're entitled to what the taxes are. But once we do that, I guess it's my understanding that once we do that, then Yandell County is the owner of that piece of property.
Correct.
And so then, how can we if we market that property and sell that property for a higher value? How can we give that money back to the property owner when they're not the property owner? That Yandell County is the property owner. But I agree philosophically with Commissioner Sterrett that we're really entitled to back taxes owed. But how do we take the rest of them? What can we do with the
Write a
rest
check.
of them? Yeah, if we can, but we're the owner of the property, and I'm not so sure we can do that.
Well, but we are the owner of the property is because we took it and we sold it, which we certainly have the right to do because we owe taxes are owed on it. But the remainder of that, and I think we would include administrative costs and fees and all kinds of things to make us whole. But also, if there's $200,000 that's in excess of that, that's equity that someone has spent their whole life building up, let's say in a house, for us to take that, that's a windfall for government. So I would suggest, if we could, lawfully, to return that money to the person who spent however long building up that equity.
Yeah, and I don't believe that we can. The statutes are very clear on how the proceeds from an auction are to be distributed. And after we deduct for administrative expenses and costs, after we deduct for any municipal liens or other liens on the property that might be out there, the statute's very clear on what has to happen with the proceeds. And essentially it gets distributed back to the taxing districts. So my understanding is there really isn't a mechanism in the statute to return a portion or all of those proceeds to the previous owner. There is one provision in statute, and we've talked a little bit about that, and we've looked at using that for one property where the individual who's still in the home is the same individual who was there before they went into foreclosure. And in that situation, it is optional for us to consider selling the property back to the owner.
Just because they're there.
Correct. They are the record owner, and it's been in the same ownership through the whole process. So that's an option that we've explored with the property up on the Old Hills. We haven't reached an agreement yet with that owner, but that is one way to potentially get the property back to a homeowner if the board is inclined to try and do that. But you know, I haven't spent a great deal of time investigating whether or not there are other avenues or if any other counties are handling foreclosed property along the lines you're suggesting we can do that. But I'm not aware, based on the research we've done so far, of any way to do that under statute. So, I mean, if you want us to explore that, I can do a little more digging. But
I think
I'm not aware of a way to do that.
I think it would be wise on our part to explore to the extent possible, what would be an option agreed if somebody has developed some ownership in that property. I would venture to say there would be few properties that really had any equity value, that they hadn't used that to try and catch up their back taxes before it went into foreclosure. But, you know, that's because it's 6 years from the time they didn't pay their taxes until we end up with their property. And during the course of that time, a prudent person would be taking every avenue possible, I would think, to resolve that issue and retain their property ownership, knowing that there's what's going to happen. Now, but there are circumstances that can preclude somebody doing what they should and need to do, and I'm not aware of all those circumstances, but I would suggest possibly if there is the opportunity to delve a little deeper into it to see if anything does exist that would make it possible for us to do that. It would be nice to know that we have explored it, and if in fact there is a way to do it, that we are taken that way. I don't disagree with Commissioner Sterrett that I don't mind Yamhill County being the poster county for others on doing the right thing.
Sure.
And the other thing is, if we're going to go down that route, then I think we might consider some kind of a, I don't know, call it a training or some kind of an educational program where if properties are going into foreclosure, at that fourth year, for instance, maybe those property owners being brought in and told, given some guidelines on how they could avoid this, and made aware that there's nothing we as the county can do once that reaches that period.
Yeah.
If you have any equity or anything, it's gonna come to us. So if there's any way you can, and, you know, find ways maybe of educating them as to what options they might have. And we could do that. We could set up a little class.
So there are notice requirements that the assessor's office goes through at every single stage of this process, and after the first year, second year, third year, fourth year, even after they've been put on the foreclosure list, they're informed that they're on the list, they have 30 days, or else we're going to take judgment. Even after the judgment's taken, they get noticed that they have a 2-year right of redemption. After the expiration of the first year, they are noticed again that they have 1 final year of redemption remaining, after which the property will be deeded over to the county. So there is a great deal of both time and resources spent informing folks of what the consequences of their failure to stay current or get back, you know, get caught up on their taxes. There are a handful of situations where, you know, we end up taking ownership over actual lots with houses that we are required to then deal with folks who either haven't left or if properties have been abandoned. Most of the properties that we end up acquiring are, as we've talked about before, these little slivers and slices and oddly shaped pieces that result from subdivisions. But there are a handful, and at the moment we have a bit of a backlog. So I'd say we probably have anywhere from half a dozen to a dozen properties that are actual lots with houses, and some of them may still have, we know of at least 2 or 3, possibly more, that we're going to talk about later today, that still have folks living in them. So
There's 4 on the old list, and we don't know about the new list yet.
right. So again, I'm not aware of any mechanism under existing law in which to do this. We can do a little bit more digging. I'm not terribly optimistic that we'll find any alternatives to the way, because it's very, as you can imagine, very carefully laid out in order to ensure maximum both notice and fairness under the existing system that you can provide.
Right, and there's just a point of information is that Oregon is, as I mentioned last time, just one of the handful of states that takes the surplus in addition to the back taxes owed. So not every state does it this way. We know that Oregon doesn't, at the state level, doesn't always do things that are in the best interests of its citizen. So I just, if it can be done, I'd like to see it done, if it's possible, and if the board is, you know.
Well, I definitely think it deserves doing our due diligence and taking and doing some initial, having legal counsel do some additional research to see if it can be done. If it can be done, I'm all for returning that to the person. I think if it can't be done, then I think there's other policies that I think we could, as the commissioners, could put in place of taking that money. What I don't want to see is that money just kind of get dropped into a general fund where we can use it for anything.
We can't.
We can't.
That's
It's
the same.
required by law to be
Goes to the
distributed
tax.
back to the tax.
Back to the
district.
taxing
I think
district.
the biggest impediment to giving them the money back is the fact that as far as the law is concerned, the property is no longer theirs.
Right.
So there really isn't money to give back to them.
Right.
So,
Well, all right, well, I think we've kind of,
Yeah, until we know,
Until
realize
we know
what kind of
more,
other
we should
policy.
figure
I
it
don't
out.
think it precludes us, though, from establishing some kind of mechanism. Each year, there are X number of properties that hit that fourth year. So now they're on that last 2 years of being able to take it back. And all they need to do is bring 1 year current, isn't it?
you're right.
And that starts the process.
And a great many people who are on the list, when the list gets sent out and we file our complaint with the court, that list is sometimes, I'm just picking numbers out of the air, let's say it's 30 names. Before we take judgment, that list is often reduced by 5, 10, or 15 because people do come in and they either pay off everything that's owed or they pay off 1 year, which is sufficient to get them off the
The
list.
people, Christian, question asks is, they go through this notification process, it's all throughout the whole process,
Mhm.
these notifications. And one of these notifications, let's say at the 4-year mark, in these notifications we send out, are the people in those notifications, because I've never seen one that's used throughout the process, are they made aware that they only have to pay 1 year and then is that really part of? Or
That
are
would be
they,
the question.
if we
Yeah.
don't train them, or if they're not educated to that fact, they think, well, geez, I got this much and now I gotta pay 6 years, I can't afford it, I might as well let them take it.
That
When
would
they
be
don't
a
know
question
they
you'd
can
have to
pay
ask the
1 year.
assessor's office. I expect that if folks come in, I would hope that they have that
Yeah, and I
discussion,
don't know.
but I don't know.
and the Housing Authority is very, very proactive
I
with
think
the
they would be,
program
yeah.
to help with folks who are facing foreclosure.
And the entire foreclosure list is also published in the newspaper. And I think we have a spot, we put it up on our website.
And I think from our standpoint, and I don't know if this addresses completely Mary's concern, but if we are being proactive and assisting people, we can't change the ORS. They do owe the taxes, we've got to, but if we are making them aware of options prior to that date when they lose it, that's.
I know that Scott Maytubby, our previous assessor, was very proactive in doing that and managed to get on a number of occasions, for example, folks who were elderly onto the Department of Revenue tax deferral program. I don't know exactly what Derek is
I
doing.
mean,
He's got
I think
folks.
that's something we can get up to date. What is our current assessor? What does he do? I think that's.
Somebody's mentally ill, if somebody's, you know,
Right.
I just don't want to give them that.
But, and I do appreciate Commissioner Starrett's desire to make sure we're doing the right thing. And so I think it's something we need to continue to be looking at and exploring. And I would love to see us have further discussion on what is the exact procedure and policy of the county going to be, and always trying to make sure it's that thing that is most appropriate for our citizens and not for the county. So-
Sure.
So before we proceed, I have 2 people coming at 2:30. Do you want me to delay their arrival until 2:45?
We probably are, that might not be a bad idea.
Thank you.
If we get done early, we'll say, where were you?
That's Silas and Shane. Thank you. And Bill.
Okay, is that
Thank you.
satisfactory?
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
So, did you want to have any other discussions about how we are going to proceed with the properties that we've got?
So a question, so I think this all was precipitated by Dayton, and we had an
Right.
unusual circumstance with those with those lots, and we're looking at perhaps, so we've talked to the city of Dayton about using it for workforce affordable housing. These are all terms that I think are getting bandied about, but there's, the definition of them is a little bit sketchy, you know, what's affordable? Well, it's affordable to somebody, so I think they're just looking at that. So do we give the properties to the city? Do we have restrictions on those properties? Do we have any kind of revision clauses? Do we keep the property? How much do we get involved? I'm of the opinion, and I think Christian, the wisdom of this is that we just don't have too much, we're not gonna micromanage what they do, other than to say the purpose of this is to give them to you to use for this purpose, and let's say it's a lower price, and I think we should be made whole based on the taxes, it can then be sold to a developer, and he can build the houses affordably because he's not paying for market value for land.
And I've talked to a couple of the counties who have made similar decisions and are doing similar things. So that's sort of a secondary part of the sort of practice and policy that we might follow. So if I can maybe just kind of give you the outlines and sort of the goalposts that I took note of, and then we can talk a little more specifically about how we might handle properties that the board identifies at some point as potential candidates for affordable housing. So as a practice and a procedure for going forward, we would, prior to the expiration of the redemption periods, our office would work with assessment and tax to review the upcoming properties that are going to be coming off of the redemption period. So we kind of have a sense of what's coming. Then as soon as possible following expiration of the redemption period, we work with them to document all those properties, identify the tax lots, identify any prior deeds or documentation that we have, establish what the certified RMVs are, and then as soon as possible, get those properties deeded from the tax collector over to the county. Again, figure out if there's any other missing information that we would need going forward, a more detailed legal description, etc. And then we would review, county counsel's office would review those properties internally, and then we would bring those, make sure we had the information we needed, and then come to the board and have a meeting with the board to discuss those recently acquired foreclosed properties. A general sort of overarching theme would be, unless the board determines that the properties may be appropriate for retention as open space, for example, if they're adjacent to a potential park or an open space, or if the county decides to retain them because they're adjacent to a right-of-way. We have some properties that are right in the middle of several roads, or if they're appropriate to be retained for other county purposes, or if they are a potential candidate for low-income or an affordable housing project. Otherwise, the goal would be to get those properties auctioned or sold privately and back on the tax rolls as quickly as possible. Then we would decide what we're going to do with the properties that are identified as potential candidates. The rest we would move quickly towards auctioning, with the goal of having an auction each fall as soon as possible after the county comes into ownership. And then I would think it makes sense to maintain the list of all of our foreclosed properties somewhere on our website, so that folks are interested in looking at that, they can go there. And then aim to hold an auction in the fall of each year if we have sufficient enough properties to justify the cost and expense of conducting a sale. And then if we do come into properties that are occupied, of course we need to work with the occupants to determine when and how they're going to vacate, or under the statute I cited before, whether there's an option for them to repurchase the property from the county at a price to be negotiated. And then if they refuse to leave, we have to proceed with the eviction process, so that we can then get those properties auctioned and sold. So does that sound like a reasonable sort of general framework? And then as part of that, when we discuss these properties, if some are identified as good candidates for affordable housing, then the question becomes how involved does the board want to be or not want to be? Do we want to have basic discussions with municipalities about what they want to do, and as long as they profess a desire to use those properties for affordable housing, deed the properties to them at a price to be discussed and negotiated with a reversionary clause in it that says if you don't use this for affordable housing within the next 3 to 5 years, it reverts to the county. Or other options would be to sort of remain a sort of partner in the background with them. For example, we've talked about this with Dayton, while they go forward with their RFQ to determine what interest there might be from developers, they could include in those materials, the county is a participant in this process, the county has property that they are willing to donate to this venture, but we want to hear from you what your interests are, and then if they qualify for low-income housing, we could potentially deed the property directly to the developer. Once the city's gone through their selection process and identified who it is that they want to move forward with. Those are some of the different ways to approach it. That way, there's less concern on our part that the city or the local government is moving in a direction that the board is comfortable with.
Well, I like the revisionary clause, and for a couple of reasons. Number one, I think if the property exists within a city boundaries, that I like the city to have control over what that does it with, based on, once we deed them based on whatever value it is, let them determine how it's gonna be sold with the requirements, whether it's for affordable housing or whatever it is. And that's one of the reasons I like that. What I said a long time ago, what I really don't want as a county, I don't think it's up to us to really sit on property. If it has a use out there, look at some of the properties we've looked at before that we've been on, I think, 7 years, 8 years, 9 years.
Yeah, some we've had for a while.
Having the county sit on that amount of property and not have it back on the tax roll. It's some of the little slivers you can't do anything about, but some of those, we're not getting it back on the tax roll, so it's costing us money by not having it back on the tax rolls. So I guess I like where if it's in the city and the city is willing to go through whatever documents we have with that revisionary clause that's saying, if this is what you're expected to use, and if you don't, then we'll take it within 3 years, we'll take it back. That to me is the ideal. At least to me, that's the ideal situation.
Okay. And we cover it for costs, expenses,
Whatever that.
and what the outstanding taxes were, so that we have some amount to distribute back to the taxing districts, and then
Yeah.
it would get to the cities at a reduced rate, and they could then work with their developer.
Any properties that we transfer back to a city entity, we do need to recover those owed taxes
And the cost
on
of
those
those.
properties and the cost, because there's a number of tax industries, not just the county, that are involved, and so we owe an obligation to them to do our best to recapture those numbers also and get those redistributed. So in a plan to get this property into the city for the purpose of developing it, no matter in what nature, if they're gonna be working with a contractor to develop the property, the understanding is that prior to any development, that money has to come to the county, and then the city owns the property and do anything they want with it.
Well, I think that right there is that if the city owns the property, they can't do anything they want with it. Because the very purpose of us either doing a sale where we're just selling for fees and taxes at that low, I mean, we could have sold it at auction and made more money. But if we sell it just for taxes and fees, then they have to, it's with a purpose, a stated purpose that it's used for.
And if they don't use it for that, it reverts.
It comes back to
Yes,
us.
absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, and like that property on Lafayette and 14th for the drop-in center, that's one that we found that would be suitable, could be suitable. At this point, I don't know if that's gonna happen, but, so that,
Now, that's a little bit different, and I didn't think we were talking about transferring that property to another
No.
public entity.
no. Well,
Yeah.
See, we have some limitations when we acquire property through real property through tax foreclosure. We can sell it to another public entity without an auction, or we can sell it to a developer potentially if they are going to pursue low-income housing. So
But
you
if-
couldn't sell
Can't you
it
lease
to.
it to another entity.
Yes, we could.
For $1
We could
a
certainly
year.
lease
That's
it.
And that was
what we
what-
discussed.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, we had talked about potentially
To wipe
leasing that
that,
property.
right, okay, so, all right, well, yeah, I think, I mean.
Does that sound like
those
a
seem to make
I think
basic
it's a good way to
framework?
proceed, very good way to
Yeah.
proceed.
It's
But I think it
fine.
addresses the issue, it may not be a lot of parcels, but it addresses the issue for us to do our part in support of getting for more affordable housing in Yamhill County. I think I think that's the best thing.
It gives us a general outline of
Yeah.
how to proceed.
Yeah.
There are gonna be individual pieces of property that come up
Sure.
that are gonna require that we take a little deeper look at them, because of circumstances, but at least we go in knowing that we have a framework with which to work, and get these properties moving,
Yeah.
get them into the hands of entities that will develop them, get them auctioned if necessary, so that we can get them back on the tax roll and let private citizens do what they want with them, which would be great if we take, but I think bottom line in all of this discussion is that we've got to take these stacks of properties and get them moving and get them off of our.
Yeah.
So one quick question though, if, for instance, we hadn't established a policy as to what we're gonna do, and if other cities, municipalities are coming to us saying, how do we get in on the action? Without us having established a policy, this isn't really for us to be taking properties that should be sold for taxes, at least, let's put it that way, and handing them over to municipalities to say, flip them, make a buck, put it in. This is not, they're not up for grabs.
No,
It's a giveaway.
that's right.
It's not a giveaway.
No.
And I mean, if any of you get calls, feel free to refer them to us and we'll talk with them about it, which we've been doing. There's been some interest expressed and I've explained to folks how I believe we're gonna be moving forward, which is these are not properties that will be transferred at a very low rate so that the cities can turn around and resell them or auction them themselves. They will come with the condition that you utilize them for affordable housing, or they'll revert to the county and the county will proceed with an auction.
But I also think one of the things, I don't want to see the private sector cut out of being able to either bid to buy the properties or bid to develop the properties.
So
And
that,
if we're
again,
in and
if we're sort of stepping back, once we deed it to the cities, then it will be up to the cities to ensure that that is,
They work with the
that their process provides for that access and fairness.
Right,
Unless
but-
we make that a condition.
I'm not sure
Of
we can
this-
put that in the deed. We'd have to remain some other way involved as a partner with their project, which is the other option we talked about.
So when we did say, okay, we've got 14 lots in Dayton and we've expressed purposes of affordable housing, can we say, as part of the deal, we'd like to see that you are including private sector developers in your RFQ?
I think we're getting a little bit into the weeds there on putting that into a deed restriction. We could certainly maybe enter into some sort of an IGA with the city, and that said, we agree to transfer this property to you once you have identified your developer, and you have a right of first refusal to buy this property when that happens, and then we hold on to it till the point that we know who it is they're selling to, and then we have a little more skin in the game throughout the process, and then maybe work with them to ensure that they've opened it up to the private sector.
I think this, though, falls under that unique situation, because how many times are we gonna foreclose on a property with like 8 lots altogether?
Yeah, probably not that many lots connected. They're usually
Right.
single home lots, or we have a couple of lots that are outside that are larger in acreage, but probably wouldn't be appropriate candidates for affordable housing.
Yeah, so, and this is why I say, we're gonna have these unique situations come up, and we've gotta leave ourselves some latitude for dealing with them. But as a general rule, I think what you outlined initially would give us a good outline.
Yeah, I think maybe the biggest and best hammer we would have, so to speak, to ensure that the cities didn't preclude anyone from bidding, is to say, we'd like to make sure you open up this process as broadly as possible. And if they don't the first time, we're probably not going to be looking at interested, we're not going to be working with them on deeding properties to them again into the future. So it would be in their interest to to do that.
And I'd have to think the majority of our cities, and Dayton's just one aspect, of the majority of our cities, I think they understand why we would be doing this. And if we tell me, well, like Christian said, we tell them that, you know, we'd like you to open up this process as broad as possible, and carry that. I'm pretty sure that our cities, our city governments would do that.
I can't think of why they would structure a request for qualifications or request for proposal process that excluded anyone. You know, they're looking for as many proposals from as many people with good ideas as they can find. And presumably that would be, you know, nonprofits as well as folks in the private sector, if they understand the parameters of the transaction and they may come forward with great ideas. I just don't see why they would say, if we're limiting this to a few. You know, that doesn't make a lot of sense, but.
But I think it warrants us continuing to monitor, but I think the biggest thing we need to do is set a process where we're getting these either auctioned or
Yeah.
into the communities, getting them off of our books,
Right.
and getting them on the tax rolls as quickly as possible. And when we do have unique situations or pieces of property that we do have that could be utilized in a different way, that we've addressed it, we have ways of approaching that to make it feasible for cities and the private sector to be involved in obtaining those properties for affordable housing or other social needs that could be addressed within the ORSs.
Speaking of, you ready to move to properties?
Well, I want to make sure
I
that.
think staff, I have
Yeah.
a good idea
Thanks,
of what we'd
Kristen.
like to do. from
Yeah,
there.
Appreciate that.
absolutely.
We
All right,
can bring those
so-
ideas back to you for some further discussion.
Yeah, once they're done, sure.
So do we want to go into executive session for the purpose of reviewing these
We
properties?
have enough time to run through
Yeah,
some?
we'll take 2 minutes and then.
Maybe more. Okay.
Okay.
All right.
All right, so
Just a minute, just-
go ahead and read
just-
the,
just
well,
hang on
we
a
will.
So you need to get carried.
But prior to that, I'm gonna move on and move the consent agenda. If there's anything anybody would like to pull off there, let me know now.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Commissioner Sterrett.
I would like to, I would like to pull off number 13, just for a little more clarification and discussion.
Okay, so we'll pull 13 off under personnel of the consent agenda. Anything else that either of the commissioners have, that they do not want to move on to the consent?
No, Mr. Chair, I discussed the ones with, I think it's 7, 8, and 9, with Jessica and read all the documentation. I'd make a recommendation for these 7, 8, and 9 stay on the consent agenda.
Okay, the reason I wanted to get through this part, Silas agreed to come in to explain any of his requests on here. He is on his own time, and I would like to recognize that.
Okay.
But since all your items are on the
His,
consent
his time is our time, but he is salaried, but by the same token, this is time that he has set aside for holiday. So if there are no items that pertain to Silas that my fellow commissioner would like to pull off, I will say to Silas, thank you very much and
It was
have a
nice
very
seeing
Merry
you.
Christmas.
I
Unless
had a
there's something
delicious
you would
seasoned
like
candy.
to bring.
Thank you. And a cup of coffee, so no, I have nothing further.
Well, you
Thank
can sit, you can sit and
Just
observe
for
since
this.
you're here, Silas.
Bill and I got to have a conversation. We hadn't actually met, so
Oh.
there was value in that
Oh,
one.
wow.
Very nice.
And I got to see a little sneak preview of what's coming on the yield sign, but I
To your
won't.
neighborhood.
I won't share all
It's
of
nice
that.
of you to
Yeah,
walk
not too
over,
far
nice
from
of you
me.
to walk the lot
Nice
distance
to
over here
see
and
you,
see our
Silas.
Yeah, nice
Silas.
to see you all. Happy
Yes,
holidays.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank
You
you
have a
very
good
much.
one.
Yep.
Bye.
Okay. All right, so with that now, we will then move to an update from our IT department. Shane, if you would, take it away.
All right. Ready here?
Mr. Chair, the item that was pulled off the consent agenda, are
Number
you going to discuss
13.
that on Thursday, or are you going to have a discussion
We'll
about
have
that
a
item now?
discussion after the updates here.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Pleased to be here today and to present the quarterly update for the or Information Technology Quarterly Update for the Commissioners. There's going to be two main sections. It'll be, we'll first review completed projects, and then we'll look at projects pending or in progress. So if you have any questions, please feel free to ask throughout. So let's begin. So we'll start with completed projects. So we've had to create several new servers. I've listed some of them here. FTP, which is our file transfer protocol. ATOMs, we have a new, working on a new upgrade, and so we were able to get a new server, a virtual server, as well as upgrade our SQL server. And that's our jail management software, PBK. Of course, our prosecutor, like our PAL, that's the case management for the DA. Domain controllers for the MDT domain, so essentially police cars, and then Ascend Web. And essentially, that's the portal for the new tax assessor product. The next several line items all relate to the tax assessor, even though they went go live, excuse me, in June, I believe it was. There were several post-go live activities that we've been assisting them with. So some of these I'll talk about a little bit, and then if you have any questions, please feel free to ask. So the first was we completed the June 30th and the reports and the salary reports. The June 30th, of course, is the pre-tax roll report, and the salary reports Oregon Department of Revenue requires valuation, tracking, statistical information. So that's what those reports do. Lots of on-demand queries, tax bills. We extracted images from our DocuWare system for consumption in ProVal. Ascend Web implementation and mods. And a couple of the mods we did, basically they had a tax balance calculator, and it was more like a point in time. And so what we did is created a service that really reflects real time where you're at. So it gives a little better user experience going to the site. And then in our legacy system, we displayed more information than what Ascend Web was displaying. So we kind of went with a similar thing and presented a web page with that additional information.
So just to, is that the last one associated with Ascend?
No, a couple more.
No, then I'll
Okay.
say one first.
Retrofitting the permit database for Ascend and ProVal. Reformatted the new Locksbox payments. And the creation of the real estate and flat sales monthly files. And the real estate files, of course, so that's a snapshot of property features and land characteristics, and the flat sales is historical information. And lastly, ProVal 9 test upgrade. And they're looking at ProVal 9 mainly as a prerequisite for some other software that they're currently wanting to implement. I believe it's the Pictometry. So that's it for the Thomson Reuters stuff.
Okay, and so since this was a 6-year process that was full of ups and downs, now that you have been totally involved and it's integrated into our system, what do you think about the system? Is it everything we were hoping? Is it functioning in a good manner?
I mean, yeah. I mean, I think it's doing everything, everything we want. We're actively working with Derek's group, looking at his process improvements, and obviously he's looking at, at other software. I think it's a huge step forward that we were able to complete, our business cycle, meaning getting the turning the roll, collecting payments. We've been going through a lot of that, so that's all promising. So. Yeah, I mean, overall, I feel pretty good about it. I know they're talking about Momentum. I mean, that was a product that we were supposed to go to.
That was the one they originally sold us and couldn't.
Yeah, I mean, I hope we can, I would hope we could stay on this for a while. I mean, I think we all know going software projects are difficult to manage and costly, and so I'm hoping that, I mean, right now, from my point of view, I mean, it seems to do what it's supposed to. So.
And that was when we accepted the fact that they were not going to bring the other system to us. The idea was that we were gonna go this way, and this was going to be our system, and we were gonna continue to develop it. I just wanna make sure that, you know, if we've got something that isn't right, we don't need to continue down the road fighting it. But if you think this thing's working, Derek and his people like it, Derek and the people over there like it. It's certainly 1,000% better than what they had, so.
I would agree.
Okay.
Definitely moving in the right direction, and I think Derek's group, I think it's been a good group effort with IT and with Derek's group and with Thompson Reuters.
And I think that's incredible,
So-
really important that the IT and the assessor's office have been really pulling together to make this thing be everything it can, so.
Absolutely.
Appreciate it.
I
Thank you.
agree.
Let me ask you a question, just for my own interest or my background. If you look at all these Thompson Reuters things and everything that you had to have your staff spend time on up front, how many of these things were really, how do I say, anticipated, that IT knew about ahead of time and wasn't brought in after the fact or correct the issue? Because for me, this gets to the whole issue of project management. You know, are you trying to continue playing catch up, or are these things that weren't defined up front, but it was, oh, by the way, now we need to do this, and oh, by the way, now we need to do this, and oh, by the way, we need to do that? Tough question.
Well, I guess maybe I can kind of jump in, because I mean, this is a project that was basically co-managed by the assessor, who, of course, you know, Derek just transitioned into the assessor. So you had the previous assessor that was there working with IT. This wasn't an IT project. This was an assessor's office project with a huge amount of IT support that was going into it. And I would highlight, because I know Shane won't say it, but you know, because he'll be modest about it, but really his project management skills and coming in and working with Derek and his experience, I think helped get the project as a whole organized and moving forward. But a lot of these items, you know, we didn't have a full project plan that Shane was handed when he
And that was the reason I
started.
asked that, Ken, because, you know, I have to really hand it to Shane and his crew and everything they did. And I think Derek's staff did a really good job, but I have to keep asking myself is that because that we didn't have a big, for a project this size, we didn't really have an upfront project management effort that was handled by all the people that needed to be up front. How much additional efficiency or how much additional staff, what did this cost by not having that up front?
Well,
And it happened at a time when we were changing, I mean, all of this was happening when we were changing IT management. And as this was moving forward, Shane was coming in trying to redevelop a system that was in trouble. Doing that at the same time, the assessor's office is working with Thompson Reuters,
Yeah.
bringing this system in, and there were a lot of moving parts. If in a perfect world, we would have had this project as an overall project with all interested parties involved. We thought we were on a different system that was moving forward, and all this got thrown out when they decided they couldn't get that system working down in San Diego, so they weren't gonna bring it to Oregon. There were a number of pieces.
And I think,
so-
Mr. Chair, and I agree with you, and the reason I ask those specific questions is because I think this turns out to be one that could be a good learning experience. And I don't want to catch us making the same type of
And
mistake
I don't think that
without doing
perfect
it.
storm is gonna repeat itself. I think that we're all aware that the best way to move into a project like this is with all the pieces in place. we didn't have the,
But that's, yes, we
didn't have
I appreciate
the
that.
ability to do that at this point.
And the other initial challenge, if you recall, is we actually contracted with Manitron, and then Manitron was purchased by Thomson Reuters. So they then had a management change and a refocus and a retooling of where they wanted to go. So this was one of those projects that, you're right, it was a good learning experience, but also a good example of just how fluid sometimes these projects can end up being, despite your best intentions.
Well,
or
I
despite your
just
best
think we
planning.
pulled off since June, if we look at this, that IT and the tax assessor, but I think Shane, they pulled off a lot to make this go in a period of things they may not know of anything about.
Thomson Reuters left us hanging out.
No question.
So anyway, but bottom line is, we're here,
Yeah.
and I just wanted to clarify with Shane that the systems have been integrated and that we have a working process, and that moving forward, you're fully integrated into the system now. So as these updates come, as you and Derek have a good working relationship, so that will continue to develop. So I just appreciate everybody's effort in getting us to this point.
Yeah, I think that Derek did a great job, no doubt about it. He's been great to work with, and I think he's got a good handle on it. I mean, yeah, some of this stuff, should be the plan, but aside from that, yeah, we made it, and it's a great team effort, and we continue to work with Derek, and I think we're making great progress.
Good.
Oh, I do too. I think we made probably better progress than a lot of people probably would have expected.
Yeah, and I think Jill and Todd are the primary two people who work with him, and together they're gelling really well. It's going good, so, yeah, great observations, appreciate that. County clerk, creation of the VOPTA file, and again, of course, different source now, going to Pro Valley Ascend, so we worked with Brian on that. That completed. Corrections, personal safety checklist service. What that is basically is we created a service to, if we don't have this, what they call a PSC score, we would go out to the Oregon Community Justice Commission's website, to the risk assessment tool. It's kind of an automated way of running it there and scraping that information back, and then we store it here. And really that's just a quick objective validation assessment tool for an offender to look at the probability or likelihood if they're going to repeat as, get rearrested for a felony or for, personal or property, damage or anything like that based on prior history. So it's been nice, to have that automated, and that seems to be working well. So again, with corrections, we're really, building on our reporting inventory. Tableau, which is that reporting platform we purchased at the end of last fiscal year. We're starting to get some good reports, some good interactive dashboards, and that's something I think corrections is going to be a poster child, but I hope at some point I'd like to have a demo for some of the leadership to kind of show them how we're using that and what the capabilities are, because it's just a really good tool to really empower the end users. And so yeah, that's going well. Prosecutor by Carpel, we had a major upgrade to that system, and that's complete. Sapphire Jail Medical, we had two kind of changes there where we're taking photo IDs of recent booked inmates and uploading that to the vendor, and they're putting it in the database for us. And then now we're using barcode scans for the inmate ID to pre-populate form data and pull that back for the database, so just a little more efficient, less chances of data entry, things like that. So we've added new features to the website as requested. Closed 5,262 service tickets since July 1st.
So what's so slow?
Yeah.
So,
Cut back on staff there.
And at some point, with a different ticketing system, I want to do more and be able to break that down even further. But I thought that would be kind of useful just to see how busy we are. We really are. Working with outside vendors on firewalls. This one's been interesting. I've been more than happy to have one-on-one discussions with that due to the nature that I don't really want to get into details here. But again, if you want to follow up, I'd be more than happy to teach you and discuss that. We have an offer accepted for a new help desk person. As you know, we've increased the other position there from a 26 to a 1 FTE. So we have a new person that's going to join us on January 9th. We're pretty excited about that. They've actually been working in IT since the early 2000s, so they've got to come in with a pretty good, solid foundation set of skills. And so I think that's going to be a good addition on our tier 1. So we're looking forward to that. Cost models for PC, laptops, and other equipment. Where, of course, I had to take another look this year just to see what our costs are and what we had to do, what we needed to adjust, and then looking at kind of some other common equipment that everybody uses and what that would look like, to perhaps instead of begging for money here, maybe have some kind of cost model. Look at it a little differently as to how we could get some of that back. Again, I think that'd be another discussion that we'll probably be curious about. We could take outside of here at some point and kind of look at that further. So. Core switch capital project. This one I'm really proud of. I'm really proud of the team. This is a project where we spent so much time in the planning phase, and I think that when you do that, then the execution goes really smooth. When we came in on a Sunday, and we beat our timelines for getting everything back up and running, and the next day we never really had any fallout or anything bad happen. But it was really well organized, and documentation was real key. We had actually 180 documented checkpoints that all the programmers, everybody was in. They had checklists, and they checked everything off, and they gave it to me, and then I kind of went through and validated it all. But yeah, to really formalize that process, and then we can reuse that, for future dates, depending on what projects we do. So that's going to be very useful to come up with those checklists. We spent a lot of time putting those together. But I think all in all, that really helped us to be successful with the execution of that project. So that one's behind us. Projects in progress and pending start date. Pre-trial reporting. We continue to work on that. I think part of the evidence-based decision-making policy group. That's they're kind of that goes kind of together. We kind of have a hit list, punch list from Jessica and her group as to what we're working on. And again, I think it'll be exciting for you to kind of see how Tableau really works. Yeah, it's nice to start dialing that in. We've got some really strong players over there at that policy group meeting, so I think we're heading in the right direction to get some good information. So, Thomson Reuters, again, we talked about that earlier, continuing to support Derek. Whether it's process improvement or, looking at other products, continuing to work closely with him. Microsoft licensing plan, we've been working on this for a while, looking at our compliancy, looking really where we're at. And so I'm at the point where I have a plan and what I think are next steps. And so I'm sure you will all be hearing about that very soon. So again, that would be one to probably get.
Just off the top of your head without any, I don't care about any numbers or anything. We look at our licensing plan under Microsoft. Would you say we're 100% in compliance, 90% in compliance, 80% in compliance, 50% in compliance?
We're still working on that audit.
Yeah.
No,
So,
yeah.
ready.
Yeah.
Because if it's like any other government agency I've ever known, it's probably pretty low. That's
Well, we're better than most agencies you're aware of, so.
Yeah. Like Ken said, we are. We're a little hesitant just because of that. I don't want to say something that's wrong, and we haven't actually sat down and validated everything and gone through it, and then at that point, then of course.
Are you using Microsoft's licensing validation tools to look at that, or?
What we did is we kind of did our own internal kind of look, and then I had an outside party, Microsoft expert from a third party, take a look at what we had, and the good news was they found a couple of things that we had missed. So that was all good. So I feel confident that we have the right numbers. So, all right. Testing Global Protect VPN. There's a couple ways to connect when you're remote, whether you're at home or are remote users. Right now, a lot of them use, I don't know if you've heard RDS, Remote Desktop Services. This is just another way to connect. And the difference between the two, like a Global Protect VPN would be if I'm sitting at home and I'm using this laptop and I'm connected, it's just like me sitting at my desk. It interacts very much the same. Everything's running on my local laptop. Whereas with RDS, you're really remoting to a workstation, a server, if you will, here, and you're running it, everything on that server, and it's just really presenting
Basically, this is almost
images.
like a dumb terminal. It's
Yeah,
just-
that's really the difference. And so what we're really looking at is security, performance, and cost. And I very much like to standardize, and right now we have, a couple ways of doing this. And so I'm kind of evaluating that and to see which is the best way, when you should you do which, essentially, so.
So, and I'm glad you bring this up because several times when I've gone out and used the remote, and it is slow at best. And just wondering, are we gonna move to a different system, or are we gonna continue to use both, or what is the?
That's actually, and that's what I'm working on. I don't have a definite yet. What we're doing is documenting and testing. And I've been working, actually myself and Adam have been working a lot on this together.
Good.
So we can kind of, because it's kind of interesting once you get into it and start testing the differences you find. And so that's kind of where we need to go to come up with a standard, essentially. So,
Good.
so yeah, so we're working on that. You're welcome. Recruitment for a new network administrator. I'm basically working with HR right now. They're putting a job ad together, and so I think we're getting awfully close to getting that out the door so we can start that recruitment process. Documentation. We continue to build out our documentation. I'm guessing right now we probably have 100, 150 procedures, written procedures between Tier 1 and Tier 2 at the help desk. It's just starting to become second nature when they have repetitive tasks or have things that they just simply write a procedure. We got hit up yesterday by an external entity that was having some problems. It was a really quick fix for us, like literally 5 minutes or less. But we just quickly put a quick little procedure for them and sent that off so they can help themselves. So we're building up quite an inventory. So that's a good thing. Inmate debit card project, that one's interesting. That one's complete, but apparently, there's a little bit of a snafu there, I think. But I think what happened there is, right now my understanding is, and I need to follow up with the jail, it's in their hands right now. It sounds like in this whole process, with testing and everything, there's another entity, financial institution, that they have to get money to go, there's another hop to get over to Key Bank. And somehow that got missed in the original scope of the project. Yeah, so I think that's kind of where that's at. So I think they're scoping out what it's going to take to get that extra hop in play. So I'm going to reach out and kind of see where they're at, if there's anything we can do to assist with that. So.
Because I think debit cards have to go through a third-party network. It's not like a credit card, like a Visa. It could be a Visa debit, but they go through a different network hop than the normal credit card.
That's correct. That's correct. So, yes. And let's see, capital project refinement and execution. Next time I'm here, I hope to show you. I'd like to show you another, kind of a schedule, master schedule. Obviously, trying to backfill. Things change, and right now, some of our timelines are changing and such. And so we're, I'm working closely with our supervisor and Tier 3, John Burns, and we're, kind of reassessing everything where we're at, making sure our priorities are lined up correctly, where we need to focus. And then I'm still optimistic we can get there. It's going to be challenging, but I think we can get there. So that again, the next time I hope to show you kind of a schedule of where we're at and such. So one of the things we're really focused on right now is our sieges. We have a lot coming up in June. And so we've had some action items, I think, sitting around from our last audit, which was 2015. So we've come up with a project plan, and as part of that, there's some other projects that relate to that. So that's kind of one of our main focuses, so we can pass this audit and show that. And of course, we have our switch projects in that too. And I'm working on a plan that I need to share with Ken and kind of finalize as to how we're going to get those completed as well. So far, I'm still optimistic, but it will be challenging, I'll admit, to get them all done. So that's the way it goes sometimes, things happen, so you got to deal with it. So working with HHS on building acquisitions and leases. This is like I know the Byerly building, and then there's 330 Kirby. The Booth Band's looking to move there, and we had an initial meeting with Silas and some of his team over there, and actually Joe Moore, myself, and Paul Partridge met yesterday, and kind of looked at another walkthrough, and then we kind of came up with a list of, what's important to maintenance, IT, the handoffs, and he's gonna put that in the plan, and we're gonna meet every 2 weeks to kind of just follow up and make sure that nothing falls through the cracks, and again, part of that project management process, and then hopefully, we'll have a good outcome. I think they're looking to get in there at the end of March or something like that, so anyways, yeah, working with them on that. The city, they want to move from NEC to Short Tail. NEC is a more an antiquated PBX analog phone system. Half the city's on that, and the business lines at Wycom. And so that product was end of life 2010. So they want to get off it. So actually, we had a meeting last week with the city and our vendor Structured, provide support for Short Tail. They had an initial kind of quote, so we were kind of stepping through that. So obviously we'll need to see what that looks like and the timing of that project, because I think they would have to be pretty hands-on for that, but obviously it's not going to be one of those things where we're not going to get sucked into it. So I think the timing is going to be really important on that as well. So, but it is good to see they're wanting to move away from that. That is definitely keeps me up at night sometimes. Planning. They want to move from their legacy product to a new product, and again, the legacy product being the same product that tax assessor moved away from. So we worked closely with them, coming up with helping them to put together a really nice scorecard. And so they've been sitting in some demos, and so hopefully they can have a product selection soon, and then put a project plan together, and hopefully move forward.
How's that going to fix the sort of the no connection between the A&T and planning? Is there an issue in the past that the two systems were not communicating?
Well, that was part of the problem, was when the Thomson Reuters, the legacy system that planning was using doesn't interface with the Thomson Reuters product.
Okay.
So this will resolve that by getting the new product that will be compliant or work with Thomson Reuters with that product.
Yeah, that'll be some of the questioning, because with whatever they choose, because there is going to have to be that interaction.
Yeah.
So yes.
And does Thomson Reuters have a product that integrates with the planning department, or is this?
Not currently.
Okay.
So anyway, yeah. So planning, monthly meetings with the maintenance manager. Joe and myself decided to set it up last summer. Our teams work so closely together, and all the handshaking that goes on, and Joe's team is awesome to work with. But this gives Joe and myself an opportunity to kind of look for any process improvement, look for ways that we can get better, and make sure all those communications are happening and stuff. So we found a lot of value in getting together on a monthly basis. So we've been doing that since the summer, pretty regular, and that's been working good. New check and NOV layout state requirements. I think that was on the last one. I'm still in test. I don't know what else to say about that. Pictometry geoanalyst, a couple of new products that I think you're all aware of. I believe I've seen that on the board, and it's come up. So that's some new products that Derek's looking at. So we're definitely getting engaged with that and trying to understand what's going on. I know Derek has reached out to Wayne County, and there's going to be it's interesting that we might set up some servers, or might need some outside resources. So we're trying to get a handle on what all that looks like before we move forward. So.
This geoanalyst, Shane, you working with Derek on this, is this geoanalyst part of pictometry, the geoanalyst, is this something, because I haven't had a chance to talk to Derek, was this something that was planned ahead of time? I do realize it takes more storage, more servers. Was this something that was planned ahead of time, or is this saying, well, now there's this, let's install this?
You'd have to talk to Derek about that. I think that's been on his radar for a while. I mean, I've heard him talk about that. I mean, eventually, what we had said is, once we get past the tax roll, let's get past collecting payments in some of your major business cycles, and then we can kind of talk about that. And that's again part of the ProVal 9, setting up that environment. And that's it. So.
Very good
Thank
report,
you
a lot of
very
work,
much.
very good shape.
Appreciate you, Shane.
So what have you been doing in your spare time?
Presentation.
Yeah.
He's got work to do, we can't come in here very long, we have too much work to do.
Really appreciate the update and all the work that's going on, and the integration of IT with all of our departments and the way we work together. It's critical to our operation to continue nice to, you have these relationships built so we can immediately get in and attack a problem. So thank you for that.
Appreciate that. I'll pass it on to the team. We got a good team over there too, and I think
Oh, I
they've
know.
built some good relationships with various departments.
It's kind of nice to pick up the phone and the problem resolved almost instantly, especially for a person like me who is technologically challenged. And they get me up and running quickly, so thank you.
Thank you very much.
Well, thank you. Appreciate all your time. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Merry Christmas.
Yes. Now, we will bring Mr. Anderson to the table.
Oh, I'm wide awake.
There you go. You're off.
Well, thanks for taking a couple of minutes to have a look at this today.
Just to bring people up where we are on our agenda, this was item D, the non-consent agenda item that we will be discussing on Thursday. But Bill, would you give us the background on this?
Just, excuse me for interrupting, if you all agree to this, you can then move it to consent today for Thursday.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, we've got a situation that's kind of developed, you can pass those pictures around. Last time I was here, you didn't have that monitor, maybe next time I can send pictures.
I did.
Yeah. But we've had a situation developing at the intersection of Orchard View Road and High Heaven Road, where there's a little confusion about who actually has the right of way there and what the through road is. So proposing to be able to post a yield sign at the top of Orchard View Road where it hits High Heaven Road. Give some clarity on who has the right of way there.
So who gets the right way?
High Heaven Road is a through road, and it's the one that actually has the bit more traffic on it. Neither one of them have a lot of traffic, but on the rare occasions when two vehicles come together there, it can be pretty confusing.
So I have it now because of the nice paving job of what you do, people are coming off, I haven't worked
Yeah,
down.
and that's a phenomenon that's kind of started in recent years, actually, and now that we just repaved the lower portion of Orchard View, you can pick them more, so they say. So folks are anxious to get some kind of traffic control up there.
So you're gonna put the sign where Orchard View comes in.
Yes, folks coming up the hill on Orchard View, the city westbound, are required to yield any kind of traffic passing on High Heaven.
You don't know pretty well that just a yield sign.
I do. Like I said, that either road barely has 100 cars a day on it, but there are times when people come together there at the same time. I really think a good sign
Clarifies
is
it.
at this time.
Thank you for that.
All right?
Okay, Bill, if everybody's in accord with that, then we'll go ahead and move that to consent.
Thank you. Merry Christmas.
Bill,
Sorry for the wait.
thank you, and
Thank you.
thank you for the professionalism of all of our signs. You do a great job. out
Yes.
there.
I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Very much.
Thank you.
Okay, so now we then, having moved through our agenda items, we did take a break from our work session, so.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair, I
Yes.
ask that we take item 13 off for discussion.
I'm sorry, thank you, Mary, or Commissioner Sterry. Item 13, approve the FTE change to the grants and special project manager position from a .60 FTE to a full FTE effective January 9, 2018. And Commissioner Sterry, you'd like to have some further discussion on that?
Yeah, just some clarification and just some thoughts subsequent to discussions that we originally had about this. I wanted to make sure, it seems like we're moving a lot of positions from part-time to full-time. Our office staff incoming will be full-time. This will be full-time. Perhaps there's anticipated changes in the sheriff's office. And I see that while there's no question about the fact that we are short-staffed we need help. We're growing, and there's always that perception that, government is growing, and there's no question, as I said, that we do need help. And in this particular position, I wanted to make sure that this wasn't going to become one of those things that did not designate time for projects for the commissioners to be involved in. And I know in the past, when Jane held the position, there were times when there were other projects that kind of got short shrift because most of the time the position was dedicated to working on the trail. And I just want to make sure that there's going to be a way for us to, once this position has been approved, that we don't have basically a full-time position that's dedicated simply to that one project. And if we are past the point where that's using up a lot of time for grants and things, that we find a way to equitably allocate the time so that everybody gets a little bit of help on their specific projects that they have going. And I know that's going to be kind of a tough one, but I just don't want to say, okay, let's go ahead and do this, and then we've got another position that's a full-time position.
I'll go a little bit about what my comments to our administrator were. Is that, number one is, I do believe we need to upgrade that position. My concern is, particularly with other positions also, is that everybody at the county has a job classification, but not everybody has necessarily a job description, which is different.
Everyone has a job description.
But this, when you and I talked the other day.
No, she has a job description.
But what I'm saying, but this job description, I think, going back to what you said, other things have been talked about all the things this person can do. If they're going to be a grants manager in the special projects, I want to make sure it's spelled out, just what you're saying, that they're working on special projects such as doing records research or something. That isn't really a project, it's more of an administrative type function, isn't included in this job description. Because I looked at this one, and I believe we do need this position, but I believe it needs for project management and for grant, and to be able to take this, and we're only increasing it, from 0.60 to 1, to say, okay, now all of a sudden this person, now they're going to be helping with this, or they're going to be helping with that. So I'm trying to get back to what you're saying, Commissioner. I believe that job description has to be pretty well spelled out, that this person's time, what this person's time is going to be spent doing, so they don't kind of get put off on these doing all these other things. So that was my only comment. If she's project grants manager and project description, that's what she should be working on. And I think there should be time carved out for the commissioners to work on specific
I
projects.
made the point to Laura when we were discussing this, that this person reports to Laura, and anytime we as commissioners have a project that we want to use this position for, that we go to Laura and say, I've got this project, and Laura will assign that person's time to our project or to anything we're working on. But I think it's important we all recognize the reporting relationship that this position will have, and the county administrator will assign those duties as the importance of those is present, and that we keep that uppermost in mind and recognize that if in fact we do have something that needs doing and needs attention, Laura will then utilize the personnel that report to her to the best of her ability to make sure that our needs get met, and that the allocation of that time is done in a manner that recognizes the importance of each of the things that we've got going on. So.
And I'll have Carrie track her time. She may touch base with you this week or next week about what kind of projects you've got going on that you could use her assistance with. But then she and I will meet and talk about how her time should be allocated. We meet every week. I'll have her track her time so we can make sure that her time is balanced between the grants she's writing and the projects she's managing for the board.
Question about the grants. Are these grants, so these are grants that are just county projects. We're not asking her to do projects for other
No.
entities.
Correct. The only kinds of assistance she provides for other entities are maybe technical assistance in terms of recommending grants if they go after themselves. And if she has time, she might review a grant that another entity has written. But that's only if she has time.
Got it, okay,
And again, that would go through Laura.
got it.
And with
So does
the
that-
addition,
Is
Yes.
that satisfactory?
Listen.
and with the addition of the time, with, for Carrie to have some help here, and that will give Laura a person that maybe some of those detailed type things can be allocated down here and free up a little bit of that time too. So, but Laura's gonna be the hub of those hours. And I just wanna make sure that we're aware of that and that we make sure our requests go through Laura, so this position isn't challenged trying to keep everybody happy and having to wonder what should I do and what shouldn't I, so.
Got it, thank you.
Okay, anything further? So that's,
That's it.
okay. Then, with that, does anybody need a short break, other than me, because I've gotta put a phone call into my 4 o'clock appointment to let them know that I'm not gonna be there.
What do we still have left?
We've got.
We still have a whole stack of
Oh,
properties.
yeah.
Should we break some of those properties out? We've gone through 8 of them, I think.
So
maybe 9 of them.
I had a suggestion. I think we got a sense sort of where you are inclined to go with the most recent properties. What I suggest we maybe do is we'll just set all those little slivers and orphans aside as things that we know are gonna go to auction. We'll identify the parcels that are either large enough lots that they could be worth considering, or that have an existing home or business on them. We'll do some more research, we'll find out if they're occupied, we'll see what the status is of each of those properties, and then we can come back with that information,
Yeah.
rather than go through them.
I'm fine with it.
Sounds like a good
I
idea.
think for staff, that's an
Thank you.
ideal thing. Staff could,
Yeah.
I don't think we have to sit down here and go through it, but I agree.
Okay.
That
Yes.
might allow you to get to your meeting.
No, well, that's
Yes.
fine, I just
Thank
wanna
you.
make sure that we are,
I just don't want to spend a lot of time reviewing stuff
Yeah.
that we already.
I mean, I think
know.
if we have a sense of where you
Yeah.
would like to go
Well,
with
I
these,
do
and so
too.
we'll pursue
Okay.
that, and then
And-
come back maybe after the new
We're
year
good.
and have another session.
So we know what action we're gonna take. on
and
these
that,
pieces.
that notebook that I have upstairs.
Yes.
That does not include these, if I'm
Correct.
mistaken.
Yes, it's gonna be updated. I've been talking to Christian on this, you kind of are a little ahead of me, but about doing, a book of what's going to go to the neighbors and, or what's gonna be offered privately,
Great.
what's going to be offered in an auction. That way there's not a whole lot of commingling with those. Again, I was gonna talk to Christian about that this
But
week.
the point I was making is, I'd like to see a reduction in the numbers. However, we're gonna dispose of those properties, I want us to get a process
So the ones where
started
we've
and moving
received
forward.
interest from neighbors, we've been pursuing a potential sale. The rest of them, unless the county decides to hold on to those, would be part of the upcoming sale.
Good.
Which we're targeting for spring.
Okay, good, so let's plan another session
You want to do that?
and
You wanna-
go through Laura, and we'll get a session on the books
Yes,
to
after
do
the new
that.
year.
And you guys will all get updated books as soon as we get into that process as well.
Give us our book electronically, just so we don't have to.
Okay, so-
We're gonna do this way,
Any commissioner comments?
10 seconds.
Yes, ma'am, you've
Just want
got
to
'em.
say, we've got so far about 500 people registered on emergency notification system, Yankton County alerts. 41 people did not complete their profiles, so Brian painstakingly contacted each one of them to make sure he doesn't want to have to do that. And we're also hoping that in short order, we'll be able to do a notification of anyone driving through the county who's just in a geographic area for something that happened like yesterday on I-5.
Is that, did Brian tell you, is that an emergency notification system? I think you brought up a good point. If they don't complete the information,
It's not, the profile does not fit. So if you haven't, it's a good thing to check,
Right.
for people to check, to make sure that their profile's been.
but if it's not completed, Brian needs a record that it's not complete.
He can, but sometimes there's not enough information for him to be able to contact
Okay,
them.
got it.
But hopefully, we're gonna start getting the word out. The sheriff's gonna be going around to
Yeah.
different cities to tell them what their buy-in could be, so. Okay,
Commissioner Olson, anything?
Nothing for me, I think we've done enough with
I
that.
just do a quick thank you to everybody who participated yesterday. We had an amazing turnout of people for the ribbon cutting on that phase of the bypass. I think the message was put forth very clearly that this is just the beginning, not the end, and that we need considerable help, state and federal. But anyway, it was, I thought, a very, very good opportunity for people to see how great Yamhill County is and the participation. So, thank all of you. And with that, we will adjourn this informal session and work session of Yamhill County Board of Supervisors.